years. After attending the Army War College, he was assigned to the faculty, and later became chairman of the Department of National and International Security Studies. In his second career, he taught business and management at Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Colonel Girard has a bachelor's degree from Mississippi Southern University, master's degree from Monmouth and Shippensburg Universities, and a doctoral degree in public affairs from Penn State. He and his wife, Mary Lee, have 8 children, 27 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. He enjoys writing and public speaking. You can find a copy of his book, The Road to Chavatoga Mountain, in the Bosler Library and at Amazon.com. His talk today is about his experiences growing up during the 1930s and the early war years that followed. Let's please welcome Colonel Girard.
Turn my phone off. Okay, can you hear me okay? All right, thank you very much for that introduction. My talk today, I need to preface it by saying this is not an academic presentation of all the factors leading up to the Depression, state of the economy, and so on. Actually, it's my personal experiences during those years. It's a variation of a presentation I give to schools here in Carlisle. And this is a special group, so I've fine-tuned a couple of parts of it, and maybe I'll have a question or two as we go along. I hope that you'll enjoy this. I think it'll be, for many, a trip through memory lane. And though my trip was a good part of it in New Jersey, there's even so many things since we live here in Carlisle that I see historically or in the past. There was so much like what the area that I grew up in and the things that happened in that area. So I hope that you'll enjoy this presentation as we go along. When I present this to the schools, I usually start out with this bit of a cartoon, and they stare at it for a minute or two, and I say to them, what's the message here? And there's just, some mixed responses like, fuse is out, this and that, and so on. And finally someone will say, you know what? Yeah, I know what this is. It means that we've got everything, and we can't live with a few minutes of interruption. And that basically is the message. And I've used that with somebody gets it within a minute or two. Anyway, and I usually follow that up with a hand on a blackboard or whiteboard, whatever you call it nowadays, a markup of a type of graph. So on the right side, on the vertical column, I put technology, and along the base horizontal part, I put time. And I draw this, not to scale, of course, but I draw this huge curve going up. And what I'm pointing out to them is this is where I entered this curve, and this is where you are now, up at the top of the technology line. So much technology in so few years, relatively speaking. So my pitch to them is, you need to talk to your grandparents while they're still around, okay? Because there's so much that they can tell you about. And that's my start, that's my hook, and hopefully it gets them. Now, my story starts way back. My dad was born in Diennes, Belgium. It's a French-speaking part of the country, and he spoke French. And a luxury liner, and he was on the liner, made 3 trips on the Belgian land, back and forth from Antwerp to New York City, to the harbor here. And later on, years later, because my dad left us when I was 13 years old, so much of what I've gathered over time came from my mom, and she became older and so on, and some papers and things that I had. Anyway, I got to wondering, about when he came through Ellis Island and so on, because that's where everyone went. And again, the internet and all the stuff you could do with that, I was exploring and looking and so on, and came across names somewhat like this, but I couldn't come across his name. And finally I gave up on that. But what I found out later on was he made these 3 trips to the United States, but on the last trip, he decided to get off the ship. He took off. Okay. He decided to stay in the USA. That's a problem like we're facing today in many ways, I guess. Stay in the USA. So he changed his name. He got a Social Security card. I'm not sure how all that went, but that was his arrival. So it was in New York City. It was in the mid 1925, 1926 era. He'd spent some time, several years in Paris as part of his early growing up, but ended here in the United States. There. Where's that doing that? Anyway, so here was a French speaker coming to the United States. Now my mom had belonged to a family that had come from Quebec, French-speaking part of Canada. They'd come down to Massachusetts, to Fall River, first with Milltown, and then they moved down to New York City. So my mom lived in New York City, my dad was in New York City. They were married there, and that was, spoke French. I'll tell you a little more about as we go on. So the Depression was upon us in 1930, terrible, terrible times. And I was thinking several times, and I don't have a photo of this right here, how tough it was if you look on and explore this on the internet and so on. I know you probably do from time to time. These folks lined up for donuts and coffee and a bit to eat. But when I see those pictures of those people who lived out on the farms, out west, out in the boondocks, they're so sad. It's hard to picture just what they were going through. Anyway, bad times were upon us. Now what happened was, this is a picture in Central Park. In 1931, my mom and dad went to Florida, and I'm thinking, if I recall some of my mom's recollections for me, it looked like there might be more work in Florida during the winter months. So they went to Florida for a year, or the better part of a year, then came back to New York City, where I was born. Originally, we lived in Manhattan. And they moved into a rental apartment on the west side, around 65th Street. Now, today, that's like a super high income area. You could buy an apartment there without having a whole lot of money. But that time it wasn't. So we came back to New York, moved into an apartment on 65th Street. I think it was right near Central Park. Moved in, and pretty soon the FBI came knocking at the door. So I'm thinking, my father must have been scared to death. I'm thinking, that people were coming after him for being an alien at that time or something. But that wasn't the case at all. What it was all about is shown in this next picture. You know what the incident was? The Lindbergh baby had been kidnapped. Okay? And there was a nationwide search to find out, who, what, where, and then the baby was found dead later on. So yeah, it was the Lindbergh baby across the country. So what happened to me was, there's my picture on the left, there's a Lindbergh baby on the right, and we were, I think, within 5 months So the FBI's knocking on the door, they're looking for the Lindbergh baby. My father. So an odd part of that story is that my future brother-in-law, Mary Lee's brother, climbed onto the back of a Dugan truck in New Jersey. Dugan was a bakery delivery outfit. So the guy gets back to his home base, closes up the truck, and there's this little kid in the back of the truck. So he called the cops. I got the Lindbergh baby in the back of my truck. So that's what was going on there at that time. So Central Park, by the way, that was my hangout when I was a little kid. My mom, there was a sort of a bridge, a walkway, and a short bridge crossing right around 65th, it might be 66th Street. And my mom used to walk over that little bridge area, and I used to play on these rocks. So I'll tell you more about that rock later on. Okay, now the next thing we did, my family decided to move west. So we moved out to West Orange, New Jersey. Whoa, what a trip. Yeah, West Orange was the home of Thomas A. Edison, who lived in Level Park, a gated, very affluent area, and the larger part of the town was West Orange. And the Edison factories were there, the storage battery factory, and a factory that was dedicated to Ediphone. Ediphone was in competition with a different company at that time. I worked in both of those plants. In fact, if you lived and grew up in New Jersey, your destiny was pretty well set for you, because you would go down to the Edison factory after you graduated from high school, and you would sign up, and then you worked for Thomas A. Edison Incorporated till you were like 60 years old or whatever it was, and then you left, they gave you a calendar. Maybe they gave you, if you were an executive, maybe they go with, a gold watch or something like that. But everybody in my account virtually worked with Edison. Made me think that probably, so what would it be here in Carlisle? Maslin? Or maybe Carlisle's hiring rubber. People worked years and years and years and retired from that place. Now, one important thing about the contribution that the Edison factory made was the whistle. This huge whistle. 8 o'clock in the morning it blew, 12 o'clock at noon it blew for lunchtime, and 5 o'clock it blew at the end of the work day. So for families and kids and moms and so on, it was like, I want you in the house within 5 minutes after the 5 o'clock whistle blows. So everything that was connected to everything that happened in West Orange. And during the war, it was the major sound audio device for air raids when we were waiting for the Germans to bomb West Orange. I wondered about that. But that was an important piece of our town. Now, another interesting thing I thought, we didn't have supermarkets in those days at all. And I would guess your experiences for many people here would be much the same. Instead, we had little grocery stores that were here and there throughout the borough or the town or whatever it was. And that was the case for us. Now, actually, this is Watson Avenue. There are 2 brick apartment houses here, and we lived in one, and then we lived in the other for a while also. And then across the street, grocery store, and some other things there. So, and behind us, the lots. We used to talk about playing in the lots all the time. I never realized that the lot is like, a lot is a real estate term that has a specific dimension. The lots. But it was like a jungle out there. I mean, you could really weeds and trees and bushes, and so we got there for hours. I mean, if you were too far away from home, maybe you could take a pee out there in the lot. No one would ever know about it. So, and we had, across the street was Jimmy the Butcher. He had 2 boys that worked for him from the time they were, 11 or 12 years old. And in those days, remember, the butcher shop wasn't all this prepackaged stuff laying out there. He would have these huge pieces of World War II broke out, his two sons immediately joined the Marine Corps, and one of them was killed shortly thereafter. I mean, it was like the first casualty that we knew about in our area. It's very, very sad. Two young guys, they're only about 17 years old, I'm sure. Let's see, there was an apartment over here, and a claimants, an apartment there, and lots of apartments. At a grocery store, this was interesting. It was run by an old German man. His name was Mr. Connect. He had a big handlebar mustache, and he shuffled around the place, you know, with an apron down to his ankles and so on. And in that grocery store, if you open the door, I mean, the smells were just great. There was always an aroma of all the cheeses and this and that and so on. And he had a 55-gallon drum in there, and it was filled with pickles. So for a nickel, you could get a pickle. My mom gave me a nickel to buy a pickle. I did buy a pickle. I bought some chewing gum. Anyway, an interesting thing about the grocery store was on Saturday morning, he had his kids and grandkids out here on the sidewalk, and they were all dressed with little uniforms and swastikas on. They were part of the German youth, and he had them out there, they lined up, and they marched off to somewhere, or were back in the back of the building. Yeah, it's really weird, you know, we saw those kids with those strange uniforms on. Wow. Okay, and these, this was part of FDR's, President Roosevelt's shovel-ready program. This was the WPA guys. They were out there. They like shoveled the dirt along the gutter, all the way down to the end of the street. They were all these big guys, or in this case, they were Italian guys. And so we used to make fun at them and call them names, and they used to chase us. Anyway, that's the way it was. But this might be the best part. You know what that is? It's a pile of horse manure. Because when the dairy man would come, Albany Dairy would come, and he would park the wagon there and the horse usually had a big muzzle full of oats or whatever, you know, horse chomping on the oats and so on, and then a dairy guy would take off, and there would be the deposit. Right then. Okay. The biggest thing, the thing closest to a big store was the A&P store, which was like 10 or 12 blocks away. And few people in our area had cars. So that local store was a very important place. And that was part of the FDR program, First Office Administration, or CCC, as we know from its connections here.
WPA, we piddle around.
We piddle around?
WPA, we piddle around.
What did you say? WPA, we piddle around.
But I was scared. We shouldn't make fun of them, and they chase us. So here's the dairy guy who comes to deliver his dairy goods and so on. Of course, that was feedback on that one. The other was so many things were carried around by wagons in those days. And one was the Iceman. And I was attracted to this photo because you see this little kid, he's running toward the ice wagon. Why would he do that?
Get a chip.
Yeah, we get a chip of ice. We did that all the time because the Iceman would have thing, because he knew your ice box, where you live, and he'd go through, and so he'd chunk pieces off that were big enough, but a lot of splinter pieces were all over the place. So the kids used to run up and get a piece of ice to chew on. Used to chew on tar too. That wasn't very smart. Now, most of the kids in our neighborhood, I mean, you knew mostly from like their original nationalities where they came from. So in our area, it was mostly Italians and Irish, for the most part. So to see, those are all names I knew that went up there. This was like my very best friend, forever and ever, as I was growing up. And people here and there, the Irish side, my wife's side of the family, somewhere over there. And let's see, you might remember, I put this name here. There was one Polish family on the street, and they had a daughter named Helen. Helen Dankowski was the first girl I ever kissed. It was in that, yeah, come sooner. Anyway, one thing led to another, but it was really very innocent. I mean, innocent, she never slapped my face or anything like that. I think 9, 8 or 9. But I had a girlfriend before that, but that's not.
He had a girlfriend before her, but that was a different story.
I need to say my wife, Mary Lee. I'm so glad I married you. That I didn't marry Helen Dankowski. I swore 30 years later at a reunion. Holy cow.
So he's glad he married you. And not Helen Dankowski.
I love you dearly.
Did you all play spin the ball?
Yes. Yeah, that was very exciting. It was really fun. Because you wanted to pass the point to the right person.
Yeah.
Wow. Our school rules were so different, but so very interesting. And when I'm telling the students about this, I said, notice those desks were screwed to the floor. You didn't have any groupie stuff in those days. You might have been good or bad. But then you had an inkwell, you know, occasionally some wise guy would grow in front of the sticker braid in the inkwell, which wasn't very nice. But the classrooms typically had several things for sure. Always an American flag. And also always a picture of George Washington, the Gilbert Stuart one, which was a portrait that was never finished. Did you know that historically? Somehow, I don't know whether he died or what the story was, but the bottom of that picture, not shown here, it was never completed. But that was George Washington in every class I ever went to. And then there was a Bible in every class. Now, as school was beginning during the day, we had a Bible reading in those times. And invariably, most of the time, it was the 23rd Psalm. Okay? Whoever had kids took turns reading it, or the teacher would ask someone to read it. So, as a Catholic kid, I was going to public school, and we had strict instructions that we were not to read from the Bible that was in the public school, because some guy named, what's his name, put that one together, and somebody else, the church, put that one together, and we were not to read. So, but I heard the 23rd Psalm read over and over and over again, and I said, you know what? That's got to be the most beautiful prayer I ever heard in my whole life. And I still believe that, so I'm thinking, what's the big deal here? What a beautiful prayer. And I think now every time I hear it, I think back to when I was a kid. But I can follow all the words and the movements. So it was just very special to me. Now, I don't know if this happened in your school, but when I was a little kid, this is the way we used to salute the flag. That was the Pledge of Allegiance. And then, I think, historically around 1939, the Nazi movement grew and so on, there was some legislation passed that said, we're not going to do this anymore. So it changed that. And of course, this was what was going on in Germany with the youth groups. And that's the way those little kids used to dress up in front of Mr. Connect's store. So then we went to the Pledge of Allegiance as we know it today. I was like this picture, because at 10 o'clock in the morning, we used to get a little bit of a snack break, and that was a carton of half a pint of milk, in a straw, and 2 graham crackers. They're hooked together, the 2 crackers. And so, what I'm prompted to think about, nowadays we're so concerned, as we should be, about weapons, guns, and things, in the school and so on. But what gets to me is the overaction of some of this stuff. Because they would have kicked me out of school in a heartbeat. What we used to do in my class, and this was even 5th or 6th grade, we used to chew the graham crackers into the shape of a gun. And then we used to shoot at the other guys and play. Guys in class. The girls, even at that time, the girls were so mature that they just like ignored us completely. It was so stupid. And one thing, and I wrote a letter to the editor, I know whether anybody saw it a few months ago. I titled it My 22 Caliber Cookie. Because there was so much flying around, that kid points his finger at somebody, he was kicked out of school, it's unbelievable. Or a slice of pie. Come on. So anyway, but that prompted me to do another research that's somewhat related to this. When I was a little kid, what grade it was, I had a pair of boots, I think they were from Sears Roebuck, and they had a little pocket on the side for a penknife. Now, does that register? Anybody? I can't tell you the time I've spent, I get in trouble for this, looking for a picture of those boots. Nowhere could I find it anywhere, but I had a pair of those boots, and I think they were from Sears. So in the absence of a photo, I did my own sketch. Oh,
That's not,
well, there it is. But that's what it looked like. And I swear it really existed, and some people out there are saying, yes, yes, it did. So we had games we played with the little pen knives. Okay, guys were playing marbles out there. We did marbles a couple different ways. Some people did them in a big circle, but part of our playground was dirt. So we had, you could put your heel in the dirt and dig a hole. Did anyone do that? And then you pitch the marbles to the hole and so on. And so the game worked from that direction. And also, just about everybody, until we were around the 6th grade, I think, we wore knickerbockers, you know, trousers down to your knees, and long socks. And everybody knows what that's, right? Talk about a primitive. Those were awful. I mean, unless you had a perfectly smooth street, and then you had to crank up the sides, shoe and fit, put on sneakers, blah, blah, blah. My girls, what a difference that makes now. Girls playing hopscotch, they still do that. Girls playing jacks, I don't know. My girls played jacks when they were small. Jump rope, yeah. And all. I used to listen to them sing out. Not last night, but the night before, 24 robbers came knocking at the door. I ran out, they ran in, hit me on the head with a bottle of gin. Now, one of the most important parts of our life, of course, was the radio. From morning until night, okay? All the stuff on the radio. Like the TV was for future kids. And in the morning, the soaps were on for women housewives, you know, were doing the kitchen, doing the morning dishes and so on. And I was looking for something, and I did find it. I don't know how many people will remember this out there. Helen Trent. Oh, like for 30 years, okay? And the pitch was, and now, the romance of Helen Trent. The real-life drama of Helen Trent, who, when life mocks her, breaks her hopes, dashes her against the rocks of despair, fights back bravely, successfully, to prove what so many women long to prove, that because a woman is 35 or more, romance in life need not be over.
romance and
That romance
romance.
can begin at 35.
Romance can begin at 35.
I couldn't understand that at all.
Then in the afternoon, at 5 o'clock, which coincided with the Edison whistle, by the way, not your thing. If you didn't want to miss your favorite programs, these short 15-minute programs came on. And you probably remember Jack Armstrong, Captain Midnight, Dick Tracy, Don Winslow of the Navy, Pop Harrigan, Little Orphan Annie for Ovaltine, Tom Mix for Ralston. When is Ralston time in Texas? Then surely will agree. This whole wake up from cereal gives you cowboy energy. It's delicious and nutritious, full of golden type in there something like historic, or old, or vintage as a title, you know, it's showing you those chickle chocks. In other words, it goes back to just 10 or 20 years ago. Because that now is old and vintage. It's unbelievable. I was looking for the several cereals that when I was a kid, it was like Kellogg's Corn Flakes, Wheaties, oatmeal, cream of wheat. Okay, like 3 or 4 things you could get, but not all the stuff that's on there today. It's unbelievable. Well, at 7 to 8 p.m. at night, then these were the 30-minute programs: Green Hornet, Lone Ranger, Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, big people pouting in the background. But also, this was a time for the really scary movies. You remember those? Like The Inner Sanctum, Suspense, The Whistler.
Yes.
The Shadow. Believe me, that's enough of men. And I was so scared. My mom and dad worked, and a lot of times they worked in the evening, so I had a babysitter, and little did I know, she really wasn't watching me. She was out on the front steps hanging out with my boyfriend. And I was scared to death when these programs came on, but I didn't want to tell anyone that I was so scared. So I would hide behind the couch while it was on, and if I can get this thing to play, you'll get an idea of it here. I can just try for a moment. Anyways, the thing of probably going to go on while I'm talking later on, but there you go.
Welcome to the shadowy borderland of the squeaking door, all you hardy adventurers, into the land of the grisly, ghastly, gruesome, horrid, shocking, and monstrous. I mean, Inner Sanctum. Of course, I assume that we're all old friends here, but if by any chance there's a stranger among us, perhaps I should state the purpose for which we are here assembled.
Anyway, so scary, and I didn't want to tell them. I didn't want to tell my parents about it. Okay, so much for radio. Oh, there's a little bit more radio too. So, President Roosevelt, fireside chats, it was a big deal. Great PR move on his part, to talk to the entire country. Of course, there were tough times going on then. And, know who that is? No. From New York City. Mayor LaGuardia. Yeah, LaGuardia used to read the funnies on Sunday morning to the kids. Yeah, a little flower used to read the funnies to the kids. What was his theme? There's bad news tonight, or there's good news tonight. And my grandma was just, absolutely she had to hear that whenever it came on. Uncle Don, anybody remember? I can't remember his song exactly. Anyway, does anybody at all remember Uncle Don? Yeah. Do you remember anything unusual about him? What happened to him?
All I know is that it was a program that I didn't want to listen to, but my mother thought it would be wise.
Good for you.
Great stories.
Yeah, he was like a Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
way back. But if you're going to look this up on the internet, it's kind of interesting. The story went on that he was kicked off radio program. He lost his job because one day when somebody left the mic on in the program, supposedly what he said was, "That'll keep those little bastards for another week." So the story went round and round through the entire country. So just for the heck of it, I checked on Snopes. You know that outfit that says whether something's true or false? And they have long paragraph. But their broader conclusion was that it never happened, but they end up by saying, but throughout the entire country, however, somehow that either was passed along or somebody heard it, that was the deal. Presumably he went on for some time on the radio. Uncle Don, wow. In our town, Edison being high school, the Edison Theater was later fall and winter. So this is the movie we went to when we were kids. It was pretty crummy there, wasn't it? So it was 10 cents to get in, and there was a penny tax. Mine was a penny tax, but it was 11 cents. So we'd see the newsreel, and then there was a cereal, like Zorro. And then the main event will be whatever it was. Who's that guy? Spencer Tracy. Right. So there was a couple of movies made in the late 30s. This was 1940. I think it was Tom Edison, the boy. There was one, Eddie Rooney, I think was in that. And then there was Tom Edison, the man. And Spencer Tracy played the part of the man, Spencer Tracy. So after that movie, as some part of recognition of that movie later on, we went to Main Street, and there was, open, there were big limousines, open limousines and so on. And Spencer Tracy was coming out Main Street, and he was a crown everybody in town. Edison's was a big deal. Everybody lined the sidewalks up and down Main Street for blocks and blocks and blocks. So I was on the curb. I was standing on the curb with a bunch of, older, taller people and this and that. But I was right on the curb. So when the touring car came by, I looked, he was going back and forth. I said, "Hiya, Spencer." And I said, "Hiya, kid." So I ran home and I told my mom. I said, "Mom, today I met Spencer Tracy." Oh, that's nice. After the home, he didn't have any showers, right? YMCA had showers. We didn't have showers. So tubby time was like once a week. Unless you got in a real mess of mud and so on. But we took a bath once a week. So when I tell the kids that story, they say, "Oh, cows." So tubby, and of course the ads at that time had to do with dirt rain around the tub. There were certain soaps that would take care of the rain around the tub. Saturday night. And then we didn't have refrigerators, we had ice boxes. And the iceman knew the size of your box and where the ice went in this. What a pain. We're so blessed today. And then the cold chute, we had still here in Carlisle, you'll see the windows going to the south. So the truck came up, had extended chute, different sizes and sections, and put it right down into the cellar, into the coal bin. And then you had to shovel that coal. And I don't know whether you did this, but I remember it. So at night, we used to bank the fire, right? Bank the fire, so they closed the vents on the bottom so that the coal would sit there like a dormant stage. And in the morning, you could open those vents and the radiators would start clamping and going back and forth. So anyway, one thing that I thought about this boat noticed the asbestos on the pipes, which was a standard thing in homes, schools, and so on. What we went through years later to try and get rid of that stuff. Who knew? And there was a big factory in Jersey, I can't remember which one it was, that really this was their main product. And the gas station, way back when, I used to tell my students at the mountain, I said, you know what? About doing something, being an entrepreneur, start a business and this and that. And I tell them about how you put your gas pump, you gotta wipe your windshield, check the oil, check the tires and so on. And I would tell them, you know what? If you ran a gas station like that and you did all of that stuff for nothing, people would drive from 50 miles away to come and get gas, no matter what it costs. I don't know that. To see that anymore. And then, wow, we were so scared of this, and it's a time before we had any polio vaccine. And a good friend of mine with polio was so scared. But he was a great athlete. But he lost the use of his legs completely. He had to walk around with hand crutches after that. It was just an awful period of
I
time.
worked in a hospital with our moms.
Did you really? Yeah. Wow. What an awful thing that was. I couldn't pass that by. And how about this? Born in
Yeah.
New York City. Did they have them in places other than New York City?
Philadelphia.
So that's where one was. Yeah. So you had coins, and you put the coins in and get a piece of pie or a sandwich. Automat, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those were great. I was in New York City a couple of years ago, and no matter what, for a very busy part of the city, and I went and shopped to get a sandwich, and they had a sandwich section set up, but they also had something across the way, it's a brand new store, young entrepreneurs, and they had to set up with basic sandwiches already set up. So of course this time we're talking dollar bills, but it was right there for people who wanted some easy sandwich. Meanwhile, they had this other part there where they could make whatever kind of elaborate sandwich you wanted to have. Okay, Pearl Harbor, wow. And then World War. And then we had fire wardens. This one's one in New York City. You can see the Empire State Building in the background. But we had our share of fire wardens. And, you know, you did it too, wherever you were. So we had them in New Jersey, and they were very efficient. They walked around the streets with the flashlights and get that light out up there, because people, have to put all the lights out. And what they did at Edison's factory, it became 24/7. So they paint, much to my demise much later on, they painted every window in the place black. Because they were operating all night and so on. So years later, when I worked for Edison's as a teenager, it was like going into the depths. And you didn't see the sun again until you came out at noon or the end of the day. Fire wardens, yeah. And of course, the rationing. Well, just about anything you can think of was the ration, socks, soap, this and so on. And then, of course, major issue, of course, when the moms were out working in the factories and so on. So there's a lot of bomb facility there, a lot of attention. Women really got into that big time. And there's a piece of Edison's factory. This years later, I only kept this because I used to work right in that. But funny. And all kinds of persons around, being careful. And this has come up in our own time with the internet and all the stuff that floats around. You need to be careful what you say. Save your cans. Collecting tires. We used to collect the silver stuff from the cigarettes. You remember that cigarettes back? Was it? And they're started, these flags were, were so popular in World War II, for those who were serving, and then, for those who passed away in the war. So, this last picture here, the story behind that, is like 5 years ago, I would say, 8 years ago or something. Mary Lee and I were in New York City, and we were at a hotel that's just near Columbus Circle, southwest corner of Central Park. So I said to Mary Lee, you know what? I wonder if I can find my rock. so off we went into the park. We walked up, and there's a macadam path that circles up, and that's the outer wall of the park on the west side. So now there's bushes and trees, but I figured this rock had been taken away or beat up or run over or something years and years ago. Suddenly, after walking about 10, 12 minutes up, there it was. There it was. This was so exciting. So, anyway, so Mary Lee's with me. So I needed to, I want to tell the whole world about it. So this lady's walking the dog in the cabin path there. So I ran up to her. I'm sure I must have scared her. I said, excuse me, you see that rock there? She said, yes. I used to play on that rock.
Oh, good deal.
That's nice. That's nice. I felt so stupid I couldn't do it. So, end of story. Okay. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope that was interesting. You've seen them all, I believe it.
We've seen a lot of changes in our.
Yeah, isn't that true?
I remember the Xbox.
One thing I was thinking of as a final point to make, is up front I'm telling these kids you need to talk to your grandparents. I go to a lot of funerals these days, some are a note on this, and so I know the kids or the grandkids or the and I know a number of times I've said, hey, you know what? I knew your grandpa, I knew your dad. He was with me here and there and so on and so on. Did they ever tell you about that? And I'll tell you, most of the time they'll say, no, my dad didn't like to talk about it. I didn't like that. Oh, that's kind of sad. So I'm, turning over what I said out the very front. It's really something to think about. So I talk a lot of notes on my kids. Thanks. Yes,
I
yes.
just wanted to comment, something that's appropriate that they're doing today that they did a long time ago. Quarantine. They talk about quarantine for Ebola.
Yeah.
When I grew up, and when you grew up, when you were quarantined for measles or mumps, there was a sign on your front door. And as children, we used to walk all around the block so we wouldn't go near that house.
Really?
Wow.
No, I don't. Yeah.
I just thought I'd mention that because that was, it
Thank you.
reminded me of it when you put the flag up for the star with whoever was coming,
Yes.
You talk about blackout. My father relates to shut down all drive-ins during the duration too.
Do you think I go quarters in? No, I got 20 after 20 after.
They closed 3 of them down that were local, and that was for the duration.
And it was scary, for little kids, because the medicines whistle was blowing, and all the folks were out checking things and that. And they had a whole series of searchlights that were going back and forth across the storm skies. So you didn't have to respond. Yes.
Okay.
I identified with almost every one of the pictures, and I happened to grow up in the neighboring city of Bloomfield.
Oh,
Right next to West Orange,
Yeah.
and our Edison plant was General Motors. And so everything was the same as you experienced.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought was particularly interesting and reminded me of how jealous I was of the kids that trouble because of the
Oh,
time.
my goodness, yeah.
And I didn't qualify for either. So I never got milk. Some of it was chocolate. And it was a particularly difficult time for me every day.
That's great. That's a great story. Yeah.
That's neat.
Anything else?
Okay.
I wanted to
That's
say
it.
one other thing. I'm Italian extraction. My parents came from Italy.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of Italians in Orange. They could never say orange. It was always West Orange. And they still say Orange.
Yeah.
So
And
funny.
you're pronouncing it wrong, sir.
Yeah. What did she say? You're pronouncing it wrong. They used to say.
And
wrong.
the dialogue,
That's right.
it was religious. I mean, you would think if you go down south, when I've been a good bit of time down there, one of the first questions you might be asked is, what church do you go to? Well, a little different here up there, but it was like, Mom, I met this girl today. She's really pretty. She's Irish. So, is she Catholic? Yeah, with that. Any other? Yes.
We should inspire us all to go home and write down how it was. And not for ourselves, but for our offspring.
Yeah.
To know
Yeah.
a little bit of history.
You know, that's what prompted me, and I don't sell books, and I'm not, no, books. There's no library, by the way, here for nothing. $3.99